Hi there, and welcome to my Brain Health Cooking Kitchen. I'm Diana Liz, and I prepare recipes that are quick, easy, delicious, affordable, and best of all, neurotrophic. That is, supporting brain health. I wish I could be a vegetarian because that's where my heart lies. Unfortunately, I am always low in iron, and one of the best sources of iron is meat. When it comes to meat, I'm very particular. I don't eat a whole lot of it, and I want to make sure that what I'm getting is really good for me. And lamb is high in omega-3, and it is also high in what they call conjugated linoleic acid. And this is a unique fat. I promise you, I don't know the exact chemistry of how it works, but I do know that it is very helpful to the immune system. It reduces inflammation. It helps bone health as well as sugar regulation. And that is really important for me because I am fighting Alzheimer's disease. And we know that Alzheimer's is considered type 3 diabetes. And this is also a wonderful way of getting a good dose of zinc. So this recipe is really good for me because apples are also high in iron, and celery is one of my superfoods. And so anytime that I have an opportunity, I add celery. The recipe does not call for fennel, but I add fennel because fennel is a superfood, and fennel is high in molybdenum. And molybdenum helps remove toxins from our body. And we know that Americans are exposed to 80,000 chemicals, many of which have not been tested to see how they affect our bodies. And to be healthy, removing those toxic chemicals is important. So another important way of removing those chemicals is sweating. So sitting in the sauna and working out until you've got to sweat. Recipe calls for yellow onions. Now, the recipe, the original recipe that I started with, which is right here, called for eggplant. I do not use eggplant because I'm using tomatoes. And at one point in time, nightshades were toxic. And I can't stack them. I can tolerate tomatoes. I can tolerate an eggplant. But I can occasionally tolerate peppers. Peppers are my greatest challenge. And I'm of Mexican heritage. And it's the only way that I'm able to do the recipes is by adding a little bit of cayenne pepper, which I can tolerate, strangely enough. So no eggplant, which would be absolutely delicious. Instead, I'm using mushrooms that really help to support our immune system. Sometimes I will use portobello mushrooms, and today I'm using creminis. I try not to buy the button mushrooms that are white. Nutrition is color. Anytime that you see a beautiful color, you're seeing nutrition. Now, the apples, I don't peel the apples. But if you do not buy organic apples, you should peel them. This is nutrition, and apples are usually around number 5 on the environmental working group dirty dozen. So apples should be purchased organic whenever possible because eating the peel is important. Tomatoes are high in lectins, and if you've ever been on Facebook or YouTube, you've probably run into Dr. Gundry, and Dr. Gundry has really brought it to our attention that that the lectins should be removed. And so I have steam peeled tomatoes that I will be using, and the peel and the seeds are what have the lectins. So if you don't want to buy it out of a can, and I don't always buy it out of a can, sometimes I will buy the tomatoes and I will heat some water. And when the water is really boiling nice and bubbly, I will put the tomatoes in I put a little X on the bottom of the tomato to make it easy to peel the tomato, and pull it, then let them blister. And when they're blistered, remove them with tongs and cool them quickly and peel them, and also remove the seeds. So you don't have to buy out of a can. I'm just doing this out of ease today. Let's see, is there anything else I forgot about this recipe? We have onions that are so important for health. We have ginger, and it calls for a 2-inch piece. And even though there is ginger in the curry powder, I'm going to add real ginger because it is food is medicine, and ginger has been used as medicine for thousands of years. And I'm going to add some garlic, and even though there's already garlic in the curry powder, I'm going to add this. The recipe calls for some extra cinnamon, and I don't just buy any cinnamon. When I buy cinnamon, I buy Ceylon cinnamon. This has many more antioxidants than the other cinnamons, and it's worth the extra money that you pay to get this kind of quality. This is medicine. So Ceylon cinnamon. And it calls for garam masala, and I just love garam masala. It has organic cardamom, organic cinnamon, organic cloves, organic cumin, organic black pepper, and organic coriander. It's very, very important to add even a little bit of extra black pepper, because to make turmeric do its magic and work its best as an anti-inflammatory, you need black pepper. They work together. Recipes frequently call for extra cloves. I love the cloves that are in the garam masala. I tried adding the extra cloves, and I did not like the recipe, so I just eliminated that. I serve this recipe different ways because some days I'm more in the mood for something, and then other days it's just a matter of personal taste. I frequently serve this with brown rice, and I try to buy brown rice organic from California. Supposedly from trusted sources, I've learned that there are some organic rices from India and Pakistan that are also okay to use. They still have arsenic, but they don't have as much as other forms of rice from other countries. The Chinese and Japanese eat a lot of white rice, and they also eat a lot of seaweed, and seaweed detoxifies the body. Unfortunately, in this country, we don't eat seaweed the way they eat seaweed. And so it's more important for us to try and reduce the arsenic by buying organic or by using quinoa. And quinoa is lower glycemic. It's a source of protein. And therefore, for those of us fighting for the health of our brain, quinoa is a better choice. Although the texture of the rice is my preference, I frequently serve this meal with quinoa. Quinoa, once again, is high in iron, zinc, and selenium. And selenium is really, really important, along with other, there's also calcium and potassium. And I believe that is all my notes. I work in a clinic as a brain health coach and as a neurofeedback technician. And my clients frequently have very special needs. So finding out what their superfoods are and the foods that they are to avoid is an important part of their healing journey. To understand this process, while I was going through the Institute of Functional Medicine, I had some genetic work done by a company called Viome, Viome, and I learned many of my superfoods, and celery is one of my superfoods. So I try and include it frequently, even when it's not called for in the recipe. And one of the reasons that I love this recipe so much is because it has 3 stalks of celery. Now, the molybdenum has oxidized a little bit. You can see a little few of the brown spots. That's not going to affect its function in any way. It would be nice if it were fresher, but as you can see, I've used, this is what I have left. I usually don't put a whole lot of fennel in a recipe because I don't want to alter the taste of the recipe. I just want to add a little extra nutrition. So I'm going to shave this as thin as I can possibly get it, and not add too much. I'm going to add, I'm going to add a whole yellow onion. And so this will be the predominant taste and aroma, because smell is really important part of our taste, and the ginger and the garlic and the spices. So this, we hope, is going to disappear and just leave the nutrition. Now, I don't like the onions diced in this recipe. I like them in long slivers and so that they drape over the fork. That's my personal taste. If you like dicing, takes more time, and I'm always also interested in making it quick and easy. So, but if you don't like them in long slivers, oops, these are stuck together, then by all means, you're welcome to dice them. To get a jump start, I'm going to core the apple. So I just cut them in half. And then I don't like to make the apple pieces very small or very big. I like them Goldilocks size. So this is about what I like. Now, if you are in a hurry and you need to get this recipe going, and you don't have time, one of the ways that you can make a shortcut is by not using the fresh ginger or the fresh garlic, just going with what's in the curry powder, because it already has it in there. I just like to add nutrition, and so I take the time to do it, but that's one shortcut you can take. Now, this recipe, I usually prepare it ahead of time. I will prepare it and leave it in the crock pot on a low temperature, and the lamb just is just scrumptious that way. You may not want to add fresh ginger if you're on a blood thinner, because ginger is a blood thinner, and so is garlic. Now, I'm not going to add the ginger with the other vegetables and fruit. I'm going to add it after they have already cooked, so that it does not burn. The original recipe does not call for garlic, but I never miss an opportunity to feed the microbiome and to add the nutrition in garlic. Garlic is part of the nutrition in the Mediterranean diet that is powerful medicine. Once again, this has been used for thousands and thousands of years. Now I've taken the little paper vellum off, and I am going to use the garlic press in the interest of time. And that's a little small one, and here's a nice size one. Oops. I am not going to throw away what's left in the garlic press. I'm going to scrape it out. Now, how many one-cell organisms do you think this is going to feed? I don't know, but it'll feed a couple. And it's like the little boy with the on the ocean. The person went up to him and said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm throwing a starfish." He says, "Back in the ocean." He says, "But there's thousands of them here." I said, "Yeah, but it made a difference to this one." And so this little tiny bit it's, you can see it right there. That little tiny bit is going to feed somebody. And it is the fiber. And fiber is just as important as the rest of it. When you eat something like eggplant parmigiana that's just covered in tomatoes with the eggplant, check to see how you feel the next day, and check your hands and see if you don't feel any swelling. And when we stack the nightshades, which are, I can't think of all of them, but I know tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers, potatoes are also, when you stack them, then they're exponentially stronger. So if you take, for me, I can handle one or maybe even two, okay. But if I do more than that, it's I can feel it the next day. And I want to do everything I can to keep my brain healthy, and as my body as well. Once you get into tomato sauces, be very, very careful, because they add sugars and preservatives and all kinds of things to the products. And so when you buy anything that has been packaged, read the ingredients carefully. The lamb. I have made this recipe several times, several different ways. I have tried not to fry the lamb, and the recipe is just not what it's supposed to be if you don't fry it. So I'm going to fry it, but I'm not going to fry it in olive oil. Olive oil is nutrition, and we don't want to hurt any polyphenols or reduce the potency of this food medicine. So I'm going to leave this until I'm ready to serve it. And I've already turned off the heat and I'm ready to serve. That's when I add the olive oil, because I'm adding in omega-3, one of the most important beneficial ingredients for our brain. Now, what went wrong with my previous experiments? Well, I did one experiment using buckwheat. And the buckwheat, when I started to brown, turned purple. And I couldn't tell if the meat, the coating on the meat was browned, or if it was burnt, or where it was in the process. And then when I prepared it, it didn't turn into like a thick gravy. It was thin and runny with the stuff on the bottom. And I said, no, we can't do that. So I'm going to do what I usually do, and that is I take gluten-free all-purpose flour, and add a little bit of teff flour, add a little bit of almond flour, and I just make a concoction, and putting a couple of tablespoons of each, and then I'm going to dust it with salt and pepper, and then do this. So here we go. I'm going to be using avocado oil because it can go to a much higher temperature. And I'm not looking for polyphenols in the avocado oil. It's just a good oil to use. You can use butter or ghee. I don't like using butter or ghee. This stove is extremely difficult. It's a glass top stove. It's extremely difficult to control the temperature. So my butter burns, and anything that burns is toxic. So to avoid toxicity, I don't use butter. If I use butter, I add it at the end. And this package is $12.34, and we're going to get at least 4 servings from this. I rinsed the lamb and then dried it with a dishcloth so that it's moist but not wet. Now, you could just use all-purpose flour, gluten-free all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add a little bit of rice. I'm going to add a heaping quarter teaspoon. No, I'm not going to put all of it in at once because then it'll all disappear and I'll have to remake it, and I don't want to do that. There we go. That ought to be good. A little bit right there. I'm going to add enough avocado oil to cover the bottom of the pan. Okay, we're going to test a little tiny piece and see what it does. It's good. It's kind of just sizzles. So give them about 3 to 4 minutes and then check them again. So now I'm going to add the rest of this. And whoops, we got plenty. And drop this in. Whoops, another one. And shake it. It looks like it needed a little bit more pepper, so I'm just going to dust it. These are browning just perfectly. Now, why do I make a concoction? Well, I make a concoction because I don't want to use just buckwheat, and I don't want to use just rice flour, and I don't want to use just all-purpose gluten-free flour. So I mix them up, and you don't have to do that. You can use whichever one you want. Now I'm going to add a little bit more oil, and then I'm going to do the second batch. The way I usually do it is I cook the meat and put it in the crock pot and cover it with enough fluid that it's not going to dry out, and either add the vegetable broth, the chicken broth, or beef broth, or if you want to, you can even add water and leave it on, turn it on high for a little bit. And before I leave, I turn it up to turn it down to low. And I leave it there. So when I get home from work, I reheat the vegetables and add them and stir it up, and I have dinner. And I'm going to add some more avocado oil, and I'm going to add the onions and celery. The meat's already cooked, so that steps out of the way. I also take a little bit of the broth and put it in the pan. And give it a minute. And do not cook tomatoes in a cast iron skillet, because the tomatoes leach the iron from the cast iron skillet, and that's not the iron that we need. We need the iron from the tomatoes and from the apples and from the lamb, not from the skillet. So do not cook tomatoes in a cast iron skillet. The onions are starting to look really nice and soft. So I'm going to go ahead and add the mushrooms. There we go. Perfect timing. You might be thinking, that's a lot of vegetables. Yes, it is a lot of vegetables, and that's what we want. We want primarily a plant-based diet with just a little tiny bit of protein and of animal protein. So it's primarily celery, onions, mushrooms, onions, tomatoes, and when we serve it, it will just have a few ounces, maybe 3 ounces. And I'm going to add the apples, and I'm going to take the little bits of crusted flour, and I'm going to add them over here, adding the ginger and the garlic. Oh, this is looking gross. Now I'm going to add 1 tablespoon garam masala. And this is just organic curry. If you like it hot, you can get or a curry that that's spicy, or you can just add 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and that will make it warm. And we like it warm, so I'm going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon. There's the curry. And I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, 1 whole teaspoon of Ceylon. And this is an antioxidant, so it is okay to do that. And I'm not adding the extra cloves. The recipe also calls for a 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, and cloves are very powerful. And when the last time I made it, I added the cloves and I did not like it. Now, if you like it, by all means, they're very nutritious as well. So I'm going to add this to the vegetables. I'm really going to coat the vegetables. Now, the apples are not done yet. Now, I'm going to take the tomatoes and add them to the meat. This will help me know how much liquid is in there, and I add the liquid from the tomatoes directly in. If it were to stick, you could add the vegetable broth to the vegetables at this time. Now, what I would normally do is let the vegetables cool, and even if the apples aren't completely done, that's okay, because I'm going to warm them up when I add them to the meat again. And I would set this aside, let it cool, stir up a little bit of liquid in, either water or vegetable broth, chicken broth, beef broth, into it, and make sure that the meat has plenty of liquid. And I like to turn it on high for a short period of time, and then I turn it on low and I leave it for 3 hours. And then I add all of the vegetables in, and if I need to, add more liquid, and it's absolutely delicious. So I hope that you try this. If you like curry, and this is a good way of introducing lamb into your diet. And we talked about the benefits of lamb. It has been associated with lots of health benefits, including improved immune function, reduced inflammation, which is very important for Alzheimer's, bone mass, as well as sugar regulation, which is extremely important for Alzheimer's, and weight loss and lean body mass. So it also has omega-3. I am going to take the next step, put the meat on in the crock pot, turn it on, and leave it for a little while. Let's see. Now you can have a look at the tomatoes and the beef. The beef needs to cook a little bit longer. And I'm going to add just a small amount of broth, vegetable broth, to it. So I wish I could be a vegetarian. That's where my heart is. Unfortunately, I'm not type A blood type. Type blood A is the only blood type that can be vegetarian long-term with any adverse effects to their health. And eating like an ancient hunter-gatherer with lots of greens and lots of vegetables and plants that you gather, and a small amount of animal protein is what gives me health. Well, it's the next day, and I've just gotten back from the gym from an aerobic workout. I've taken the meat mixture that was in the refrigerator and the vegetable. The meat mixture tasted just like a delicious stew. It had a very tomatoey taste. And I've taken the vegetables, and they have all the spices, and I have stirred them in, and it's nice and thick. I may or may not need to add any more of the vegetable broth, but I'll determine that when it is heated up. I'm going to take a large skillet, so that has a big space on the bottom to heat it quickly. I try not to use the microwave except heating water, primarily rewarming coffee. I prefer, it doesn't take that much longer to heat it on the stove if I use a nice wide lip pan. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm turning it up, and I'm going to wait about 1 minute, let it heat up. And I'm going to measure probably about 2 cups for Paul and 2 cups for me. I'll kind of eyeball it. It takes about 4 minutes, 5 minutes to heat it on the stove, and it takes just as long to heat it in the microwave. So it's, for me, my preference is to heat it on the stove. I've talked about in the past of not eating the high protein meal at night, but rather eating it midday. and eating low glycemic carbs at night that promotes serotonin, which in turn creates our melatonin, allowing us to sleep better. And it makes it also easier to digest the food, the heavier food during the day rather than at night when we're sleeping. So we've got plenty left. I'm putting parts of it in 2 containers in the refrigerator. Now, I just love to add coconut milk and even coconut cream to curry, but coconut milk and curry are both on Paul's avoid list. So I try and cook the curries and not add coconut milk or coconut cream. So if you enjoy those, you are certainly welcome to add them to this recipe, and it will taste absolutely delicious. The curry is really bubbling, so I'm going to add a handful of baby spinach for Paul and another handful for me. Now, the spinach is not part of the original recipe. I do this because we practice strategic nutrition. Paul carries the MTHFR gene SNP, and that stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. It's a slight mutation. All of us carry hundreds, maybe thousands of these gene SNPs, and most of them, we don't know why they're there or what they do. But we do know that the MTHFR gene SNP makes it necessary for individuals who have this gene SNP to eat lots and lots of folate. And I'm talking serious amounts more. And so if you have trouble with energy, this is something that you might want to look in. You can use an ancestry.com. You can use a 23andMe. And Rhonda Patrick has foundmyfitness.com. And you can download your raw data from 23andMe or ancestry.com and upload it for a fee of $25. She gives you an absolutely incredible report on how you can use lifestyle interventions to improve your health based on your genes and what we currently know about your genes. Take a look at this. Wow. The apples are stand out. They provide just a little tiny bit of sweetness. Now, even though I prefer to do quinoa, today we're doing rice because we rotate. And it's very, very important that you measure serving size. A serving size of brown rice is half a cup, and this is half a cup. It's not very much. When it comes to spinach and kale and broccoli, you can add all the broccoli you want, all the spinach you want, all the kale you want. But when it comes to carbohydrates like rice, need to measure. Okay, now we're gonna load this in. Get all of the sauce. Get all of that sauce out of the pan. Now, I am not finished until I add the olive oil. And this is Texas Olive Ranch. And I would like to visit it in South Texas sometime. And I have looked at their website, and I know, like, and trust them. One of the things I do not do when it comes to olive oil is to purchase a blend. It doesn't matter if it's Cardell's or if it's California Olive Ranch or any other company. If it's a blend and it does not have a family name and a state name that is personally responsible for what goes in the bottle, I don't buy it. So I'm just about ready to serve this meal. This is the last and most important step. So I'm going to add a tablespoon for Paul and a tablespoon for me. And we want to get it down to the last drop. There we go. And then I'm going to stir. adding the olive oil without cooking with it is a very important part of adding polyphenols, which reduce inflammation and support brain health. It helps with satiety, and satiety is really important for turning off the hunger in your brain. So if you want to lose weight, olive oil at the end of a meal is ideal. So I hope that if you haven't delved into your genes and found out, or your microbiome, and found out what the needs of in those two categories, because there's superfoods for your genes and there's superfoods for your microbiome. There's also foods to avoid for your genes and foods to avoid for your microbiome. And by eating what's good for us and avoiding what's bad for us, we can really influence our health. So if you've liked any part of this, and if you found any of this helpful, I hope that you will share it with your friends and family, and that you will subscribe and follow me. It's been difficult the last 6 months or so. Paul has had some decline, but I'm back in the saddle again, as we say here in West Texas. And I am committed to this work. I am committed to sharing all I have learned since 2005, when I went through chronic fatigue and very serious burnout. And my work with Dr. Kenty Pong, and the work that I've continued to do. And it's my pleasure to serve. So until the next time, I welcome your comments, suggestions, and questions, and even requests. This recipe is for a special friend. So bon appetit for a brighter brain, and I'll catch you on the next one.